Now that we're comfortable inside the new darkened Photoshop CS6 interface, I want to give you sort of a bird's eye view tour of the new Photoshop interface. There's been some changes here, so whether you're brand new to Photoshop or if you're upgrading from Photoshop CS5, let me kind of show you what's what in terms of the interface here, and then in upcoming exercises, we'll take a much more closer look at some of the specific areas inside the interface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off right at the very top of the interface and work my way kind of down, if that works for you. And of course, this is on the Mac side, so we will have very minor differences between the Mac version of Photoshop and the Windows version of Photoshop. So Windows users, keep that in mind as well. So first of all, right across the top of my screen, we have our menu bar. Okay. Now, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through every single menu item and explain exactly what does what. We'll get to a lot of this stuff as we go. However, at this point, you might want to spend a few moments, especially if you're brand new to Photoshop or still kind of getting your footing inside Photoshop, you might want to spend some time familiarizing yourself with some of the different options and commands that we have available to us inside this main menu. And also, something that's noteworthy is, of course, on the Mac side, we have the actual Photoshop menu as well. That's just sort of a standard Mac thing. So that's pretty easy stuff. And then below that, kind of delving into the actual Photoshop interface, we have the options bar, which runs right across the top of the screen. Now, you know, if you're upgrading from previous versions of Photoshop, notice that there's no application bar. Remember the application bar? Which I never really liked anyway. To me, it was just kind of taking up screen real estate. Well, it's gone now inside Photoshop CS6, and all we have across the top now is just the options bar. Now, if you're new to all of this, how the options bar works is it's context sensitive. What I mean by that is depending on which tool we have activated inside the toolbox, depending on what it is that we're doing inside Photoshop, we're going to see different options, different icons, and so forth appearing across the options bar. So bear that in mind as we move along. And of course, as we're doing different things inside Photoshop, I'll be sure to mention some of the options that we see on the options bar. Now, below the options bar, I can see here barn1.jpg and then at and then a percentage, 25%, and then RGB8. This is the document tab, and what we can actually do is we can have multiple images open at a time, and by default, they would all appear as these document tabs across the top of the interface. And all the document tab is telling us is the file name, barn1, the current zoom percentage, so we're at 25% magnification, the color mode, we'll get into color modes later, RGB, and the bit depth, 8-bit. So we're just getting a little bit of information, I guess you could say, inside that document tab. Now, running vertically all the way down the left-hand side of the entire interface is our toolbox. And as you can see, there's a whole lot happening inside the toolbox. There's lots going on in there. In an upcoming exercise, I want to spend a lot more time talking about the toolbox, showing you some neat productivity tricks that you can use for working faster and more efficiently with the toolbox. So we'll get into that in just a little while. And then, of course, I have the main image area. That kind of goes without saying. That's pretty straightforward. Down across the bottom, we have our zoom percentage magnification once again, and we also have some document info. And then new to Photoshop CS6, notice we have mini bridge and timeline tabs sitting down at the bottom. We'll get into that stuff. Finally, way over on the right-hand side, running all the way down vertically on the right-hand side, we have our panels. And I want to talk in great detail about our panels. Sometimes they're referred to as palettes as well. Panels, palettes, tomato, tomato. It's all kind of the same stuff. But in a nutshell, if you're used to working with Photoshop, we know that we can click on these different panel tabs to flip between the different panels that we have available. Of course, there's tons and tons of panels inside Photoshop. And once again, I think what I'll do in an upcoming exercise is I will go into much greater detail about some of the panels that we have available and give you sort of an idea of what does what. In the next exercises, the upcoming exercises, I want to get into much more detail about the toolbox specifically and also your panels. Let's go and check out those two specific areas of the Photoshop interface.